G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. Those of you who've been following my channel for any length of time will be aware that one of the ways I stay connected to what's happening in the world is I read New Scientist magazine. It comes out of England. It's not actually a science journal, it's a magazine which only prints articles which have already been printed in a peer-reviewed science journal, or the article's been written by somebody who holds a university degree in the field that they are writing about. So you can't get a psychologist writing about climate science and get published in New Scientist. A couple of really good articles in the most recent edition, which I would like to share with you. The first one concerns bureaucratic mindset, which is being enforced on the British population, and I've talked to my daughter and some of her friends, it's happening here in Australia too, by the Conservative government. And I suppose I better let the article speak for itself. Magazine's datelined 18 July 2015. The article's on page 24 and 25. Written by Lynn Freedy, a freelance researcher with Hubbub, funded by the Wellcome Trust, and Robert Steam is a PhD student at Birkbeck University of London. Article titled The Wrong Mindset, which goes on to say unemployment is not a psychological disorder in need of mandatory treatment, say Lynn Freedy and Robert Stern. A banner draped from a London job centre window declares, quote, "Back to work therapy is no therapy at all," unquote. It's a protest against plans to integrate unemployment and mental health support for benefit claimants. This includes putting 350 psychological therapists into centres and pushing online therapy to people out of work. Unemployment is being redefined as a psychological disorder at a time when the United Kingdom government has vowed to cut the welfare bill by £12 billion. It joins nations such as Australia and the US in increasingly requiring claimants to comply with interventions intended to modify emotions, beliefs, and personality. While the option of free access to therapy for the unemployed makes sense, what is taking place is psychological conditionality. Claimants must demonstrate characteristics deemed desirable in workplaces, like confidence and enthusiasm, in return for welfare. The Department for Work and Pensions denies anyone will lose benefits if they refuse therapy. However, the Conservative Party manifesto warned that those who refuse a recommended medical treatment could have their payments reviewed. Claimants are already coerced into, quote, confidence-building, unquote, programs made to join humiliating psychological group activities, bracket, like building paperclip towers, close bracket, and to take meaningless and unethical psychological tests to determine, quote, strengths, unquote. Sanctions, loss of benefits for up to 3 years or referral to unpaid work placements, bracket, often known as workfare, close bracket, sounds a bit like chain gang slave labour to me, may be imposed if a claimant's attitude is deemed deficient. People with mental ill health are already disproportionately represented among those sanctioned. What's striking is that the focus of these activities isn't a job or specific job-related skills. Key outcomes specified to companies contracted, making money, getting paid to do it, to provide these interventions are, quote, employability, unquote, and, quote, job readiness, unquote. Achieving a, quote, mindset that will appeal to employers, unquote, as one course puts it. A narrow set of traits are touted as essential to getting and keeping a job. Confidence, optimism, aspiration, motivation, and infinite flexibility. Bogus constructs like, quote, psychological resistance to work, unquote, and, quote, cultures of worklessness, unquote, are used to legitimise coercive regimes that stigmatise and punish. Rebranding unemployment as a disorder distracts from the insecurity and stark inequality in many labour markets and promotes the therapeutic value of work when work is increasingly unable to provide either an income high enough to live on or emotional satisfaction. Workfare has already created a claimant workforce that lacks the legal rights of other workers. Plans to add mandatory psychological treatment are a grave concern. We're talking slavery, state-sanctioned slavery, where the unemployed and the victims of previous generations of parental failures, the people who are anxious, in emotional and mental turmoil and pain, are going to be pretty much required to run around with a saccharine smile on their faces and pretend to be happy in order to be even eligible to be paid social security benefits, like the bottom line dole payment which everybody's entitled to so that they can afford to live without needing to resort to crime in order to feed themselves. It seems to me that the conservative alleged philosophers, whatever you'd call them, conservative lobbyists and spokespeople, they've genuinely forgotten that the dole was invented to stop the poor from killing the rich. That a social security safety net is a social rest payment because if you don't have it, you just get social unrest. And it's always cheaper to pay the dole than it is to rebuild after food riots. And a really worrying thing is that private companies are getting signed up with contracts, so the government is agreeing in advance to deliver them a certain number of miscontented or malcontented miscreants. It's a bit like this drift towards the privatisation of prisons, which means that no government dares to actually consider reforming any laws which are not working, like the American 3 strikes and you're in jail forever, and their insane fixation on possession of small quantities of drugs which they've decided have to be illegal. While alcohol is the drug that's doing all the actual damage in society, they want to focus on tiny little 1% side issues. But they can't change the drug laws because 65 to 80% of the people who are in prison are in there for drug-related activities, and the government has a contract with a private company to provide a steady flow of convicted felons, people who are going to have to be accommodated in the prison, and you have to have as many people going in as you have coming out. Otherwise, you get sued by the prison company for breach of contract. If the quack psychologists, 350 psychological therapists, people who are prepared to sell out whatever little amount of learning they've got to go and get paid so they can afford their rent or their mortgage or their car payment, by treating unemployed citizens as cattle. That's what I see this as being. It's really, really upsetting. Gives me the shits. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Let's hope the government changes or something else happens. Ciao.